there's a new entry in the low to mid-range Bartop arcade field. Some of you are probably already familiar with the first version of this device, known as the RS-07 or the Retro Arcade. The new Plus model just released about a week ago, and I finally had a moment to sit down with the unit and test it. When I first read the specs on this device, I was pretty shocked not to see the same 500 to 700 MHz chip that seems to be used in every console these days. This device runs on a customized Linux kernel and is powered by an ATM 7051 quad-core processor clocked at 1 GHz with 128 MB of DDR2 RAM. Although it's not entirely necessary on a device like this, the Arcade Plus has a 4.3-inch IPS panel with a resolution of 480 by 272. The key feature that's responsible for our bump in processor speed is the HDMI out port, which I will be testing later on in this video. It's also important to note that this unit ships with a wired PlayStation-styled controller instead of the retro pads that came with the normal version of this device. In terms of physical appearance, nothing has really changed on this newer model. This is still the same low-profile Bartop arcade system with a semi-clear case and colorful arcade buttons. On the back of the unit, you can see our new HDMI out port, dual USB ports, headphone jack, TF slot, old USB charging port, and power switch. My unit also came with a fairly large power cell that I didn't have in my original unit, and this gave me a few hours of charge before it died. On the right side of the unit, you can also find a small volume slider. Now, onto the controls. The buttons themselves on this unit actually aren't that bad for input. They aren't at all mushy, but they will not invoke memories of arcade switches if that's something that you're looking for. But for what they are very responsive. The joystick is also not going to win any awards, but I didn't have any issues using it in any of my tests. You have a pretty significant degree of control over the stick when you're using it, and I like that it quickly snaps back into place when you let go. Here's a quick side-by-side between the two generations. I wanted to open up this device to try and find out some more information about the chip that they use in this model, but there doesn't seem to be much information out there. I found that this CPU is used in some tablet products, but that's about it. The internal 16GB SD card cannot be modified at this point, so you will need to make use of both slots for gaming. I can't see anyone using this device without looking dead on, but here's a quick view of the IPS from different angles. This is a true IPS panel, and it's very bright and sharp. It's time to boot up the system and see what we're working with this new model. This device separates each of the emulated systems into their own section, which is nice, and I was happy not to see the same ugly UI that came with the previous generation of this device. There are obviously going to be a few favorites missing here, but we have CPS, Neogeo, NES, GBA, GBC, GB, Mega Drive, Master System, SNES, and Game Gear. Because the internal storage of this device cannot be modified, I don't see this device shipping without ROMs, so you should have the same library that you can see on screen now. The majority of titles that I tested here were in English with a few exceptions. Each system has a large collection, all things considered, and they also have cover art on the right side of the screen, but this won't necessarily match the true art that goes with the title. I will say that not every title that you will see here will have its own cover art. I tested this device with the onboard controls to see how viable it was as a standalone unit. The device is on the small side, so I don't think anybody is going to be doing long gaming sessions without controllers, but the system is pretty good for some pickup games, which I think fits the aesthetic that they were going for with this device. In order to make filming a little easier, I'm going to be using the included wired controller for everything else that you'll see in this review. I'm going to be dipsticking around here with some of the systems that are on this unit, and I wanted to start things off with Genesis because that seems to be a safe bet on these Chinese consoles. Moving on to SNES, and we have a decent collection of titles that should hopefully give you some indication of the power of this new chip. Out of everything on this system, I would say that the SNES emulator that they used on this product is pretty decent, although you will see some graphical bugs that I think are due to the ROM versions on the internal memory. GBA is usually the point where you can start to see some cracks in products like this. This system has a large library with a mix of games that are easy to emulate and others that require a decent amount of power to run at full speed. GBA was actually the second thing that I tested on this system, and I was pretty blown away with how fluid it was, even though we're using some junk firmware on this device at the moment. I was really hopeful that this game would run, but it suffers from a fairly common bug that crashes on the initial movie sequence on some of these devices. Moving on over to Arcade Test, and I was pretty impressed with the selection of CPS games that come with this product. Performance is very solid, and this is definitely one of the highlights of this machine. Similarly, the Neogeo library includes a bunch of my favorite titles, and I would rank the performance of this system within the top 3 on this device. I wasn't expecting it at all after what you just saw, but NES is where the cracks in this system start to show. The library in the NES section includes a bunch of fake titles for some strange reason. I really think at this point manufacturers just don't have the ability to distinguish between real and fake NES games. The NES emulator that was used here in this upgrade is 100% garbage. Games run very slow no matter which region of ROM is used, and there is some pretty heavy screen tearing that leads to an overall bad experience in an otherwise decent product. This actually doesn't make sense to me given the work that went into everything else here, so I don't know why they decided to ship a product with software this bad on a retro system like the NES. The biggest fail on this device is the fact that they didn't even include a PS1 emulator to take advantage of that added horsepower from the new CPU. The first generation of this unit wasn't anything to write home about, but at least it worked. I was also disappointed to find that Sega Cd was a no-go on this new device. I will say to their credit that the HDMI out works really well on this newer model. You have 2 options for optimization once you're in a game. One option smooths out the pixels, but I find that this makes the game nauseating to play, so I opt for using the standard setting whenever I have this hooked up for video out. It's crazy that at the end of 2019, advertising AV out and having it actually function on release is a rare occurrence. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at the new model of the Retro Arcade. This is a powerful emulation system being held back by really poor software, and I hope that we can get to the point where we can port over some custom firmware to this device to unlock its true potential. My name is Taki, and I've been your host on this review. If you like what you saw here and you want to support the channel, please consider liking the video and subscribe to the channel for future videos. I'll catch you next time for another review. Now go out and enjoy the rest of your day. Taki out.